All right, everyone, we're live here in Windsor, Ontario, right on the banks of the Detroit River. If you look carefully through the glare, you can see the view. We had to come inside because it was getting a little too dark to do this, so we decided to bounce inside here. But anyways, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to contact us via Wildlife Gal or
Death Squad Salvador.
And then if you missed the broadcast, go to wildlifeiogal.com where you can find the links to Periscope. Also, probably in the next couple days, it will not be tonight, loaded up to YouTube and then also SoundCloud. So I'm here with Allison Voglesong.
Hi.
From Michigan Sea Grant / IJC / whatever
right.
else that I don't know about now.
No, Michigan Sea Grant Fellow at the International Drake Commission.
Yep. So we're going to talk about how Allison got to where she is, kind of what her job is here as, the little fellowship grant person. What would you actually, what is, your classified title here? So
Sure.
Say it right.
Yeah. Well, when I cross the border, they always ask me, so what is the International Drake Commission? Mm-hmm. And I have a little spiel, and I say it's the U.S.-Canadian cooperative agency that helps to manage water quality and or quantity of the waters that U.S. and Canada share, so including the Great Lakes, which is why in Windsor this is the Great Lakes Regional Office, and we focus exclusively on water quality. And then they say, yeah, so then what do you do? And I explain that I'm a communication specialist, so focusing on multimedia communications and digital communications.
Yep, so I had the lovely privilege of meeting Allison over a game of Jenga
at
IAGLA this year. So if those of you who don't know what IAGLA is, it's the International Association of Great Lakes Research, and they have a conference every year. Every other year it's either in Canada or U.S. So next year it's going to be actually in Windsor and Detroit. So they're doing a dual country conference, but last year was in, or technically I guess this year, it's still 2016. It's been a long year.
It has been a long year.
It was in Guelph, Ontario, at the University of Guelph. So, but yeah, it's interesting the people that you randomly meet, because when we were playing Jenga, we didn't realize who each other was. It wasn't until the next day that we were back on Twitter that we all of a sudden realized, oh yes, we know each other, we've met each other.
That's who you are, yeah.
But give us a little bit of your history as to how you got here.
Sure. So one of the things I most recently did was I completed a graduate certificate from Oregon State University's eCampus, which I highly recommend to anyone. Just generally, Oregon State has great online distance learning, and the certificate was with their Transboundary Waters group, and so the certificate's in Transboundary Water Conflict Management and Transformation. I don't know if they could have added any more words in there, but that's with Aaron Wolf.
Don't dare them.
Yeah, they probably would. You're right, and that's at Trans Waters, and so that focuses primarily on water conflict resolution and water solution collaboration, and that's a really, really great program. It was about 18 credit hours, and I learned a lot. It focused a lot on Western waters and systems of prior appropriation and conflict management out in the West, but also drew a lot on the bigger picture and something that we focus on here in the IJC, which is consensus-based resolutions to conflicts, and collaboration is usually one of the keys, although you don't have to collaborate to get consensus, and you don't have to have consensus process to collaborate, but those were kind of two of the big themes also of that graduate certificate, so it's not quite a full degree, but that was something that really helped me explore what the IJC is doing academically, and that was really fun.
So you feel like you're able to directly translate what you learned getting that certificate with what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in the first week of my fellowship here, I was applying and thinking of all the different books that we read in the certificate classes and chiming in. I'm pretty unabashed contributor to our teleconferences or meetings, and bringing up different issues there. And interestingly, some of the work that we read in the certificate helped me gain interest in the master's program that I'll be doing at the conclusion of my fellowship at the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources. Stephen Yaffe and Julia Wondalik wrote Getting to Yes, and that's a lot about public resources, collaboration, systems. And so I was like, who are these guys? And then I found out they were teaching in my own backyard, and found myself applying to the School of Natural Resources, which is also where the Michigan Sea Grant at MIC Grant, follow them, that's also where they're housed, is in U of M's SNRE. So.
Okay, so you're going to still get to play with people that you know, basically. Then.
Yeah, exactly. And the Sea Grant has a really great network of educators, and they're something that they're at the School of Natural Resources, but they're also at Michigan State University through their extension program. And they have educators all around the state and work on a variety of marine issues. Yeah, and they just released their fellowship. So if you want to be the International Joint Commission Fellow for 2017, 2018, because you'll start in June of 2017.
It's at the end of a long
through the
work
next
day.
year. Yeah, exactly. It's only Tuesday. The Michigan Sea Grant just posted their fellowship application for that, as well as the other fellowships that they facilitate at places like the Great Lakes Commission, or any agency of your choosing if you get the Knaus Fellowship, which is out in D.C. So a lot of good stuff at the Michigan Sea Grant.
So can they just go to the website and find all that information?
Yeah, I believe it's micgrant.org, or you can find it through the School of Natural Resources website as well. So all the research is posted there, and I'll probably tweet about it again today. So.
So what kind of people should look to apply for that?
Sure.
Students, or are you someone who's just graduated, or
Yeah.
what do you recommend?
Well, for me, they wanted to make sure that there wasn't anyone who was currently enrolled in graduate school, because that's just way too much work. So, but I think right now the fellowship application, they're looking at people who are students as well. So you could be currently enrolled or just finished, and you don't necessarily have to do communications. The fellow before me was water resources engineering, basically. So it's a different need every year.
So what other skills have you found that have been able to help you in your career to I don't know, be able to better do this fellowship and maybe other jobs that you've had?
Well, Nicole, you're doing one of them right now, which is interviewing, and knowing what's the right question to ask is pretty key. I've been pretty bad at it before in my life, and I think the worst is when you accidentally ask a yes or no question, and so then the person just says no. And so
that's all you get out of it.
That's all you get out of it.
I've got 10 more minutes of this to fill up. Please talk.
Yeah. And what you've already done well, I think, too, is getting people to talk about themselves and talk about what they're interested in. So sort of drawing out people's interests and letting them get going. It really draws out people's passions. And so I've had to do that with making videos, interviewing people for videos. I might not be able to use the whole interview. You have to cut out all their ums and ahs.
Right.
But you want to find those moments in an interview when somebody's saying something that, they really genuinely believe. And so asking the right question really gets to that. So that's something I learned that's really important for science communications, is even if you're not technically asking a question specifically, if you're presenting something, getting the audience to ask a question of themselves. What can I do to combat climate change? You're
trying to get them engaged.
Yeah,
in some way.
exactly. And framing is important. So.
So talking of communication and stuff, how do you feel that helps scientists? Is that something that a scientist should learn, or do you think we should just leave that to communicators and let them do that? Where should that bridge be, or should we keep it separate?
No.
How does it work best, or you do find it works maybe best in both formats, possibly?
I think that the answer has to come from who's your audience. Because who's delivering the message has a lot to do with the credibility of how it's received. So, if you're having just a talking head in your marketing department giving a spiel, it might not be taken as scientifically credible versus if the scientists themselves are communicating that message. So scientists absolutely have to learn to do communications well. At the same token, if you have someone that doesn't really matter where the credibility of the source is from, then communication specialists can be particularly helpful in reading an audience or knowing an audience. But it really comes from who are you communicating with. That's where it starts, and then the strategy differentiates from there. But it's a bridge, not a silo.
Right. Yeah, and it's one of the the arguments, or maybe this not argument, the discussions that we've had with other sci-commers is it easier to teach a scientist how to be an effective communicator, or is it easier to make a communicator an effective outsource for science?
I would have to say, well, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
That's almost a trick question.
Because I still kind of wonder that too. Like, you know, as I kind of feel more like I'm a scientist who's doing communication versus someone who does communication but just happens to be in that science field.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of wonder, like, am I as good a communicator as maybe, say, what someone who's coming from more of a traditional communication field is? But then I wonder sometimes, am I better able to pick out those pieces of science of what's important rather than have to, like, I don't know what's important, should I be communicating this or not? But I can communicate it really well once I know what it is I'm supposed to communicate. So what's kind of like your feeling for that?
But on the converse is that nothing's worse than someone who's not trained in science, who's oversimplifying your science in their communications, and then now you can't actually make decisions based off of it because it's not good science, even though it might be communicated simply, it's not getting to the right thing. I'd like to give scientists the benefit of the doubt that you all can become excellent communicators, but at the same time, I think with technology, we have so many different options for communication, and there's so many different paths that your communication can take. So it's one thing to be an excellent writer, you know, it's another thing to, you don't want to sit at my desk and dredge through the editing and copying and pasting and color correcting and, you know, sound mastering of, you know, making long videos or animating different, you know, there's a certain level of, just like when you're in the lab and you're waiting for, you know, whatever you're...
Yeah, I mean, to get that, you know, 1 minute, you know, nice produced video, it probably takes, you know, a half hour of, you know, video sometimes to be able to pick that out, and much less all the editing on the, you know, the pre-processing stuff to be able to just to get to that point to be able to take the video, much kind of like the same way when you're doing research to get to that final product of that article that you're submitting. There's so much more work that goes behind just that one little piece of paper that someone's reading at the end of it. So,
and I'm sure that I could learn, you know, R or, you know, something just like you could learn, you know, some sort of very powerful communication production system, but at the end, it's going to be, I think, about, again, the audience and what are they going to get out of it. So scientists need to be effective communicators, and can be and should be, insofar as they should be communicating well to the audience that's the most effective for them. So, you know, depends on where you're trying to get your science out to. So I think if you're trying to get science to decision makers, then yeah, maybe you want to have someone with communications to help you make sure you get the facts right.
I sound
you know,
good as I'm doing it.
Or the general public. I hate that term. There is no general public. There's a kind of subset audience of that. So, but I think that scientists could be excellent communicators.
Do you think, like, with that it's probably maybe like more of a team effort of where you should like always maybe have like, you know, a communicator that you can kind of run things by then to make sure like you're sounding good as a scientist, you know, and not maybe try to go it alone then?
Yeah.
You know, especially maybe like as you're like just getting into communications, or do you feel like maybe still down the road it's always good to kind of just run it by someone to see that it's an effective tool?
Well, it's really hard, you know. I think they say that the average reading level that newspapers should or could publish at is a 7th grade reading level. And even I struggle, you know, when we're doing report executive summaries and we're making these really, really distilled down items, or you're writing a article or a blog, you know, that it's really hard to write at that level. It's hard to write at a 12th grade level. It's hard to write, you know, at a freshman college level. So
do you think it's just because we've forgotten what it was like to be that age and to have that level of writing? And also just that, you know, there's always, and I even do the same thing, even if I'm in a field for a certain period of time, you know, with Great Lakes stuff, because I'm exposed to the word hypereutrophication, you know, that it becomes easier and easier to include jargon as this is my elementary base level of vocabulary, without saying, oh no, I need an information box with definitions and terms. Give me some pretty pictures so that I can understand.
Yeah, unless your audience is, you know, a highly educated public, in which case you don't want to talk down. If we're handing out pamphlets at the IAGLR conference, you know, we don't need it to be the pamphlets that say,
you hand out to the
the
public.
Great Lakes are between the United States and Canada, you know, like water quality is, yeah, exactly, and we don't have to define certain terms for that audience, but if you're trying to, especially if you're trying to reach a wide audience, that's exactly where it's just too easy to use certain terms and vocabulary and jargon that are every single day in your life, so you don't think anything of it, and you kind of forget that people don't know. I mean, even for an example, I wrote something up and I asked my parents and my fiance to look it over, and they gave it back and they said, "Wow, I had no idea what a basin was. It was just describing, you know, what the Great Lakes Basin is," and they just didn't think that water rolls downhill one of two ways, depending on, you know, and that. Right. But here,
I mean, once
they
you
hang
hear
out with
it,
me
it
all
really
the
makes
time.
sense.
You think I would talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but just simple words. You think that Great Lakes Basin is pretty non-technical, but it depends on who your audience is. So.
Well, one of the examples I've used before and that I find really is effective is I always kind of run any of my science or stuff through my niece and nephew. My nephew's 9 now, and my niece is 6. And when I first started my mute swan research, you know, I was talking to my nephew about it, and he spit it back out to me because I was talking to him about mute swans, which are invasive, and then the native trumpeter swans, and I, you know, explained it all to him, and he came back to me. Oh, he's like, the mute swans are the bully swans, and the trumpeter swans are the Michigan swans. When I say that to people just on the street, they get that. But if I say, you know, this one's an invasive and this one's a native, they don't necessarily understand even that jargon, which to me is something I use all the time. It seems really simple, but like if you've never heard that, you wouldn't know. But they understand a bully swan, understand if I say it's a Michigan swan.
Right, and that's because it's their frame of reference. And in SciComm, or any sort of communications, climate communication specifically, you know, they say meet your audience in the middle, meet people halfway. So you don't want to put everything in these metaphors and never get to the point of educating, but you can't just right off the bat talk about bioaccumulation because no one knows that that's really what's wrong with microplastic beads. You know, you kind of have to build up to that.
So what kind of platforms and stuff do you guys use here? Maybe like for when you're talking to scientists, and then also, I know you said you don't like the term general public, but towards more like the public side of things, like what platforms do you feel like work best for each?
Well, I'd have to say when it comes to our digital communications, you know, we're not educating on Instagram. We're just trying to get people to find us, you know, find affinity groups that they love water, and we hope that one of our hashtags bring them to our, you know, site. It's not really something that we're posting links to anything in those.
You're not linking to journal articles that some scientists put out. You're just saying, hey, here's I'm assuming a cool photo of the Detroit River. Click here to maybe learn something else.
No, not even that. It's just, you know, because it's
just to make them interested.
We're just scrolling and double tapping, and versus we have a. The IGC has 2 newsletters. So one comes out every month, once a month, called Great Lakes Connection, and it's focused exclusively on Great Lakes issues, and that's what you were saying, is that's connecting science to more broad public. So we'll either write up and summarize on our own different new scientific studies out there, new groups of consortiums of universities working on something, you know, general interest stories, but that always have a very strong scientific base, or breaking news issues. And then we have one that comes out quarterly, the Water Matters newsletter, because even though we're sitting in the Great Lakes Regional Office, the International Joint Commission works on waters that cross the boundary from east to west coast, and so that Water Matters newsletter, same thing, it's grounded in science, grounded in news, but gives updates on some of the other water basins that are mostly focused on water level issues, from the Souris and the Rainy Namakan and I mean, there's more than I can even keep track of, and I'm here, so it covers a lot of stuff, and that's only 4 times a year. So the
I have a question with that, with the newsletter. Do you guys send that out electronically, or do you still do the old paper format, or do you do a bit of both?
We do a bit of both.
Okay.
So when we're at events, as a way to get people signed up for the newsletter, and so that they know what it's not just going to be some self-promotion spam about who we hired, or we have examples. So if you come to the IJC booth at IAGLR 2017 in Detroit, you'll definitely see Great Lakes Connections printed out, and then that way you can read some of them. But we don't distribute paper, we just do it online. And so through the IJC website, you can subscribe to our newsletter that way. And we push that out on Facebook and Twitter, which I'd say is a mix of both.
Okay.
We'll post to other groups, we'll post to, photos, but we'll also post links to our stories or links to news stories. So it's kind of, on those platforms, a mix of hard science and just fun or interesting updates, cool photos, interesting maps, that kind of stuff.
Right. I remember at IAGLR you guys were doing this video series. Can you tell us about that and how effective you think that was as a tool?
Yeah, I think that it's been very effective. So the Lake Ontario Waterkeeper started this project called My Watermark, and so you can follow them at LO Waterkeeper, and Mark Matson and Kirsten Tully and Claire Lawson and all those guys who are doing such good hard work at the Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, they have this My Watermark Stories project, and just like you might have a birthmark or a weird mole or something that kind of defines you, the idea is that everyone has a watermark. Everyone has this kind of defining moment in time, relationship with the Great Lakes or with water anywhere in, Ontario. And that sort of defines the relationship with it, is a microcosm of that. And so the IJC, in partnership with Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, are collecting Great Lakes watermarks. And what's really interesting about how that all came about is that it's trying to not only have this consortium, and I guess Lake Ontario Waterkeeper has collected over 1,000 stories.
Oh, wow.
I haven't even published all the ones for my IAGLR because life gets crazy. But so it's everyday people, it's activists, it's scientists, it's decision makers. They've got Catherine McKenna telling her watermark about, and she's the Canadian Minister of Environment. And then there's everyday people like me telling their fun stories from grade 7.
But those stories are still just important no matter where you are at some point in time.
Yeah.
Most of us, at least who work on the Great Lakes or around the Great Lakes, have that moment where you just kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah. And you can submit your stories. So they're going to kill me. Watermarkproject.ca, watermarkproject.com. And then there's one where you can specifically upload your story about the Great Lakes if that's what you're interested in. But you can submit written, you can put a photo with, just a caption, you can submit just audio, or you can submit a video of your own watermark story. But the idea is to then bring it to decision makers and to have sort of proof saying, we have these beneficial uses of the water, and that's something, that's defined legally in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that we're not supposed to impair, or if they're impaired, then different legal aspects for how we protect or remediate the beneficial use impairments of the water. And so by having these watermark stories, there are ways for people to prove to government that, hey, these are their beneficial uses. Their beneficial uses are, I could give another watermark story, which is being proposed to on the, shores of Lake Michigan, under, that's a beneficial use. That if the beach was inaccessible and that beneficial use of recreation was impaired, it's sort of a really interesting way to use narrative and to use science communication, but to also use it as to buttress the law and the policy that protects and maintains the water. So cool.
Yeah, because I know one of my favorite spots on the Great Lakes is right off of Lake Michigan, up by Arcadia, and there's just this amazing view on top of this dune. I would be so sad if that little roadside park there was closed.
Exactly.
Because that is just every time I drive by, I have to stop, and it has my most favorite sunset pictures I've ever taken is right there. It's just I get warm feels about just even thinking about going by there. And yeah, it would be devastating if they closed that park because they ran out of funds. They're like, oh, people don't really go there, because there's no way to really judge how many people go there.
Yeah.
Because you're not taking, any sort of money or anything for people to come in. It's just a roadside park. And so to be able to have people, send in videos of how much they love maybe that one particular area of it, it allows the decision makers to say, all right, this is important. We need to keep this open, or send more funds to help fix that, or whatever else it is.
Precisely.
So.
Yeah. And I think that's overall what SciComm also helps to do, is sort of not only communicate science issues with people who their end users, you know, of water or of science. Right. You know, they might not need to know what the statistical significance of your experiments are, but if your science is helping to inform decisions that they're also benefiting from, you know, then it's sort of a triangle of decisions in science and the people who are affected by them. So no matter what sort of science communication you're doing, it's helping to support that end.
Right. Have people been doing where?
All right, late night meeting here. Are you going to be watching the big screen TV or something here?
No, we're live on air right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We're streaming on Twitter.
Oh.
Well, sorry to interrupt. I didn't know.
So one of our important staff here at the International Joint Commission is just checking on us to make sure we're not crazy talking to a camera on the stage.
Nope, you're in it now for good.
Yeah. But he's working late for a good cause, so. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, the fun of live TV.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about this is, you know, I've had many times where I've had like random people just walk by and we're like, you're jumping in on this now, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
So, but do you think, like, say with some of those watermark stories and other things like that, that they're going to be able to figure out, like, what is it that most people are talking about, and see these are, like, the really important things that people like of the Great Lakes. You know, hey, we like to have that, you know, park over there, or hey, we like, you know, to have, like, clean beaches, you know, and so you kind of get that, like, analytics of what it is that people are talking about and be able to figure out, okay, this is where we need to.
I like where your head is at. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's part of phase 2.
Okay.
Since this is a Lake Ontario Waterkeeper project, but you know, the big hashtag swim, drink, fish. That's what Lake Ontario Waterkeeper folks are all about, and those are sort of the big 3 beneficial uses that the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement protects. And so, to that end, I think that they're sort of categorizing these different beneficial uses under swim, drink, you know, and fish. But sometimes they're these intangibles. There's a great story from Michael Twiss, who's a professor. I think he's in Potsdam, New York right now. I forgot.
Okay.
It was at IAGLR, you know.
Right.
And his story was just that as a child, you know, dropping rocks into the water and seeing all this gunk float up, you know, that he didn't realize that it was pollution. You know, once they started remediating what was the Spanish Bay, you know, and it was an area of concern, and once the beach got better, well, then they told the kids, hey, you bugger off, you know, this is a decent place. There's no place for troublesome young kids. So that's not necessarily something where people are saying, oh, this is my beneficial use and you can't take it away from me, or, you know.
Right.
Yeah, but it's really neat. They have a map, and so all of the different watermarks are placed all over the map. And so you can kind of see,
Is that something that's, like, up online that you can see where all the watermarks
are? On the watermarkproject.ca or watermarkproject.com site, you can see a map where all of the different watermarks have been, and then when you put your own in, it'll drop a pin where you're at.
Yeah. Oh, that's really kind of
or where you're putting your watermark,
Yeah, I like that because it lets you kind of just see the scope of that. It makes you feel, I think, more included with something, you know, rather than, okay, just randomly send out a video. You now are becoming part of that greater collective.
And that's something on Great Lakes issues that it's hard to determine when you're doing science communications. You know, people respond to place-based issues. So when you're talking about the Great Lakes Basin writ large, you know, I sorry everyone, I don't connect to the entire Great Lakes Basin. I'm thinking, you know, of the Great Lakes at that beach that I connect to it, and so it's more difficult, I think, to generalize about something that 40 million people can also access at any given time, because it's just, scope is so huge, versus if you're kind of putting it in a place and making it a place-based story that other people say, oh, I have a place, or oh, that's my place, and then that helps connect people with Great Lakes issues by making it a Lake Michigan issue, or making it, you know, Grand Traverse Bay, West Beach issue, you know.
Right, yeah, because I do think sometimes there is some of that where, you know, those of us in Lake Michigan, we don't necessarily think of what, you know, happens in the other Great Lakes because we're just so focused of, you know, where we are, because we might not travel all the way over to Lake Ontario, which seems so far away and, you know, out of our scope. And then I also wonder, too, do you think that there's some of that where people in the U.S. don't necessarily think of what's happening on the Canadian side, and maybe vice versa, too, because they're just, you know, in their own little world and don't necessarily think of what's happening across the lake, because we actually do share those lakes with other people.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about the IJC is that, you know, we work exclusively on issues that are binational, and it's really kind of difficult to get people to think about a bunch of other Canadians as well when, you know, their local issue maybe not dealt with. And so how do you get people to care about a bigger system when the smaller system they have may or may not be improving along the same lines that the larger system you know, is going along. So
but if
it's
something's
hard
going
to
wrong
hear
with
a
that smaller
report
system,
that
it
says,
could still impact that whole bigger system.
Right, exactly.
And getting them to think that, yeah. Do you know if there's anything, like, we have IAGLR where we bring in Canadian and American scientists and get them together and so they can collaborate and, you know, think on projects. Is there anything like that where it's that term again, the general public, that it gets them, you know, kind of together and thinking about things?
Well, so the EPA and Environment Canada just hosted in October the Great Lakes Public Forum, and that was in Toronto. But that was an essentially bi-national or event, and it brought together not only the, you know, talking heads of governments to talk about their progress report on the Water Quality Agreement, but it did attract people from across the basin. And the International Joint Commission used to have biennial meetings, and that would travel around the basin and attract people sort of from all around, but it wasn't necessarily specifically a binational, because everything that we do is binational, so sort of implied. And we've replaced those because under the new 2012 Water Quality Agreement, now every 3 years, the EPA and ECCC put on the Great Lakes Public Forum, and then we create a space within that, and then or in conjunction with it, that kind of has replaced the biennial meeting, and that's for public comment, and that's where people, again, from all around the basin come and talk about issues, and talk about them on a binational scale. So when people submit comments, what we're looking for, well, not we, but the IJC, who I happen to be placed at right now, what they're looking for are comments on recommendations for what can the Canadian and U.S. governments do to improve their progress or attain their goals under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And so in that way, it's a pretty binational sort of focus. And so the outreach and publicity for that is also binational, but it doesn't necessarily always, and the IJC end of things, get a 50-50 response. I think, you know, there's more people where the city it's at. So.
Do you think there may be, like, say, like, locations like we have here where you have Windsor and Detroit right next to it? Do you think that there's more communication back and forth between those cities on how they manage their impacts? Maybe say like someplace like Sault Ste. Marie up north, where it's you've got that bridge right across to be able to talk to Canadians. You're not all the way across the lake; you're just across this little small width. So that way, you know, there's that, you know, binational communication maybe a little bit better there.
Well, I don't think so, because I mean, one thing that's interesting about the International Joint Commission, since it's two federal agencies, even though we have this Great Lakes regional office in Windsor, you know, there's an office in Washington, D.C. Well, that's not anywhere near a transboundary, you know, border water. And then in Ottawa, which is the same thing. And so since we're dealing with federal management, and those are more local levels, I would love to see, you know, lessons learned being shared, but I'm not aware of that. Or even at the state level, you know, I don't know that Ontario and Michigan necessarily have cozy relationship with how they're managing the waters, but that's why the IJC is so exciting and important, because, you know, on sort of a systems-wide scale, they let the two federal governments kind of share more, and there's an expectation that laws and management practices on one side are mirrored in good faith on the other side.
Great. So if you have any questions for Allison, I mean, feel free to send them in. So what things do you feel like have helped you the most? Like, you talk about doing communication and stuff. Are there other skills that you have that feel like have helped you out here?
Trying to,
like, you were talking about interviews. Is writing like something that people should work on, even if they're doing, you know, say straight up base, like let's just say we're just doing Periscope? Do you think still having a good writing base would help you out, or anything else like that?
Yeah, I would say critical thinking and using argumentation, logic, you know, being able to create an argument based on facts, which is, I think, kind of inherent to science, because otherwise you don't have a method to support your hypothesis for your research. So yeah, critical thinking and being able to be persuasive in your writing or in your infographicing, you know,
Right.
having that logic base. And I was a Model United Nations nerd in high school, so I think that helped. And everyone always told me I'd be a lawyer because I like to argue about things, you know.
Right.
But I think that being able to substantiate your claim and being able to craft a clear and concise argument is definitely pretty key for science communication.
Did you like any programs like Photoshop and other stuff like that that you find that you use on a daily basis that you need to be like well versed in to be able to like help you with your job?
I would say, I mean, I'm an InDesign fan, and I would say that if you can learn Adobe InDesign, it will give everything that you're doing in Microsoft Word or Publisher just a lot more polish. And there's plenty of free resources out there. So if you're working in print or even you're just making your poster for, you know, the presentation you're doing at IAGLA or something, I think that Adobe InDesign is particularly powerful for having control over all those little things, you know, that sometimes just are really hard to manage, like spacing between words, you know,
Right.
the kerning of your title, all those kind of funky, boring design,
all the limitations that
graphic
I feel like I
things.
have whenever I have to work in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the coolest, you know, thing that you got to do because of science communication? You feel like what's that one thing like where science communication led you to this place and you can't believe like, oh wow, I'm here and it's just because I was tweeting someone online or, you know, a story along those lines. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the moment that kind of brought so much of this together for me, I was an intern at Circle of Blue, and they do global water reporting and journalism and are really excellent at that. And I like to think that my internship at Circle of Blue taught me how to write again because college taught me how not to write. You know, it really helped me to clarify. And there's a great reporter, Brett Walton's one of the really great ones, Cody Kazachik and Keith Snyder. They're the big reporters out of Circle of Blue, and you can find them on their site and follow them. And yeah, they all really helped me to get down to the nitty-gritty. He calls it the nut graph, you know, put everything that everyone needs to know in the first 2 sentences, or otherwise no one's ever going to read beyond that, and no one's ever going to know what you're talking about. And they had a project called Action Figures where they were interviewing accomplished people in the water field all around the world, you know, regardless of if it was WASH or, you know, diarrheal disease or pumping wells or glacial research, you know, it was all across the board. And I had the opportunity to interview Erin Wolf, who's out of the Oregon State University Transboundary Waters project. And so that's how I learned about that graduate certificate program and that graduate program out there, and you know, learned a lot about what his work has done too. I mean, he's the guy who they send out to Israel, Palestine, Jordan for Jordan River Valley, you know, water conflict negotiation issues.
That
and
seems like that would be some very interesting negotiations that would be going on there for sure.
Yeah. And that I never even conceived that water negotiation, conflict negotiation, you know, was a thing, let alone a degree, let alone a job, let alone a field. And so that, I think, that moment of science communication, of being able to then write that up in a way that other people could get it, and package that in a way that wasn't, because it wasn't, you know, too much science, but it was still this very obscure, you know, what do I care what Middle East water conflict issues are going on, and learning again how to ask good interview questions and get the right story out of them, because I could just ask him for his resume and then say this is what this person did, and you know, that would be totally different. But that moment was pretty exciting for me. And I think the other one that was more just like fun, that made me think like, wow, I can do this. And I think in science communication, I'm not in a position to give many people advice, but one piece of advice, if you choose to take it from me, is that, you know, you'll get over the what do they call it, where when you don't know if you could do it, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, because you're learning something new, and there's people who, you know, have been doing infographics for a million years, and so they know everything, and their stuff looks really sleek, and you're like, and you get this imposter syndrome. But in this fellowship, there was opportunity to do a short animated video, and it was explaining PBDEs, polybrominated diphenyl ethers.
See, I didn't even know what that was.
Well,
until you explained it there.
Hours, animating and trying to create abstract, image-based movement video. It wasn't just an infographic. And I had to narrate it myself. That was the worst part. I hate hearing my own voice when I'm editing a video. But to explain, and because we were soliciting public comment on a report that we had done investigating the water quality and aquatic ecosystem health and potentially human health issues of these PBDEs, which they put in products to keep them from burning super fast right away, flame retardant chemicals. And so we were soliciting comment, and so someone had a big idea to have this video to promote soliciting public comment. And so I had little, imaginary PBDE molecules, because they weren't, scientifically accurate. They were just kind of abstractions of that, and little stick figure people, and
kind of like the little DNA guy from Jurassic Park, kind of along those lines.
Yeah,
okay.
It was like that. Yeah, it was pretty two-dimensional. But to be able to explain the bioaccumulative process and to explain the repercussions potentially that we're exploring of PBDE chemicals leaching into water, into aquatic systems, and you eat it, And that, I think, was really exciting for me to finally put something that was highly scientific. And when I was sketching it out and trying to go through it, and some scientists kind of raised their eyebrows and like, is that really, how it is? But that it got the sign-off of, the IJC employs highly talented staff scientists with PhDs, and for them to say, yes, your animated video depiction of the bioaccumulative process of these particular chemicals is accurate. For me, that was a big feather in my cap, and that was pretty cool to learn and to get over the imposter syndrome of, I think I can put all these things together and make it happen, but then it worked. And if you haven't had a chance to see the video, the comment period is closed, but the IJC has a Vimeo account, and we have all kinds of different, from recordings of presentations that are pretty dry, because they're just recordings of presentations.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. To all kinds of different short and long videos about different activities that we're doing or different issues that we're researching. So
great, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll have to check out that video for sure. That just sounds too adorable not to watch now.
I get teased about from my fiance. He every once in a while he'll go PBDEs, because that's what it sounds like when I say PBDEs over and over again for a 2-minute video.
Nice. Yeah, I could only imagine what it would sound like for me if I had to keep saying it over. It just wouldn't even come out clear anymore. So, since we don't really have any questions coming in, I figure we might as well go ahead and wrap it up, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of hungry, so let's go get some food. So I'll throw these back up here for everyone. So here are Twitter handles at wildlifebiogal.com and at
Death Squad Salvador, which
we never
explained.
explained. Are you going to explain it real quick for everyone?
If I may, yes. So The Clash is my favorite band. And first of all, that everyone has, like, their AOL Instant Messenger name. This is basically my version of my AOL Instant Messenger name. I refuse to change it, because you have to have some fun in life. So anyway, so the Clash is a punk rock band from the UK. And on the B-side of Combat Rock is my favorite song, which is Ghetto Defendant, because Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet, is saying all these dramatic, things about the horrible woes of, the world, and he says Death Squad Salvador, and for some reason I just thought that was so cool, and when it was time to adopt Twitter, that was free. Go figure, who knew that handle would be free, so that's where you can reach me at.
Awesome. Now I kind of feel like, any kind of call-up song or anything that we have to do for introducing you, that's what we're going to have to play.
Well, and it's pretty sad and sordid. I would probably pick a more upbeat punk rock song, but I do like punk rock, so you should too.
But, so if you didn't catch all of this, feel free to contact us via our Twitter handles. Also, go to wildlifebiogal.com to be able to watch us later for the link for our Periscope. And like I said earlier, I'll be putting this up on YouTube and making the SoundCloud podcast of it. That'll probably be tomorrow or maybe a day after, once I've recovered from this SciComm trip. That was absolutely amazing, but as always, it's completely exhausting.
Yeah.
But it's totally worth it. And yeah, if you've got any questions about anything, feel free to ask us. And then for all of you coming to IAGLR next year for 2017, let me tell you, the view alone is worth it. So it's an amazing setting here in Detroit to be on the river for where the conference is going to be. You are going to love it. And everyone I talk to who works in this area, goes to school in this area, says it's going to be really amazing. And we're also doing a SciComm symposium, of which Allison will be at. So definitely come to Idler 2017 and check it out, because there'll be some great food, some great settings, and some great SciComm. So till then, we'll see you guys later.
Oh.
Bye.